My husband once said that suing his mother for tattooing our 3-year-old son's neck would be the end of our marriage. When I pointed to the door and told him to go, he just stared at me like I was speaking another language. That was 6 months ago. This morning, he was standing outside my apartment, crying. My boyfriend comes from what he calls a my body is a canvas kind of family. He's covered in tattoos from head to toe, sparing only his face. I always thought it was just his personal flair, quirky, artistic, whatever. But then I met his family. Every single one of them is tatted head to toe in elaborate Japanese-style sleeves. They're more American than a county fair deep-frying contest, but they've adopted this whole aesthetic like it's a cultural mission. Some of them even have tattoos on their faces, and they treat it like a badge of honor. Every conversation somehow circles back to the struggles of dealing with attention from strangers, but you can tell they eat that attention up. All of his siblings and cousins have paired off with partners who are just as inked, and they've all had babies. Babies they've started tattooing at age 3. The family photos are wild, everyone beaming, holding up their arms and legs like a living gallery. So you can imagine the disruption when my boyfriend ended up with me. Hi, I'm Emmy, Japanese, completely uninked, and absolutely sticking out like a sore thumb. His mom, Regina, was always polite, but it was obvious she didn't see me the same way she did her tattooed daughters-in-law. She'd joke about how she wanted Yakuza sleeves, even though she's a 300-pound white woman from Ohio. Still, I never commented on how their tattoos might come off as borderline disrespectful. I just smiled and let it go. Things shifted a bit when I got pregnant. Regina warmed up slightly. I think it was the excitement of becoming a grandma. But she dropped little comments here and there, like, I hope he's raised like the rest of the family, with this tone like it was more of an expectation than a wish. I'd play dumb and say something like, oh yeah, he'll love your sushi, which, by the way, was awful. She'd just give me this weird smile. Her mouth moved, but her eyes stayed still. Our son, Kai, was born 3 years ago. He's half Japanese, half American, and, of course, not tattooed. Thankfully, my husband, Colin, seemed to be the only one in his family not completely out of his mind. We hadn't had any arguments about tattoos when it came to Kai until about a week ago. A family emergency came up, and I had to drive across state lines to help my parents. Colin was stuck in a high-stakes work meeting, so I called Regina on the off chance she could babysit. She's never exactly been thrilled about watching Kai, always had a reason to say no. But when she did agree, she was reliable. This time, though, she jumped at the chance. I could practically hear her buzzing with excitement through the phone. I should have picked up on it. Something was off. But I had to rush. My parents needed me. So I waited for Regina to arrive, gave her the basics, and left. Colin's meeting ran long, and throughout the day he kept texting to say everything was fine. But when I started the drive home, as soon as I reversed out of my parents' driveway, my phone rang. It was Colin. He said, Kai's okay, but you need to come home right now. He didn't want to say more on the phone, said he didn't want me to freak out. Naturally, I went full panic mode. I think I broke every traffic law on the books trying to get home like my Toyota was a Formula One car. When I burst through the front door, it felt like I was robbing my own house. Colin was standing silently over Kai's bed, watching him sleep. I rushed over, and I swear, I almost collapsed. There it was, on Kai's tiny neck, a tattoo. A full-on, amateur-looking dragon in green and red trying to look fierce but ending up somewhere between Halloween sticker and prison art. The skin around it was red and swollen. No bandage, no wrap, just raw skin. My dad used to be a tattoo artist. I know what an infection looks like. And that was not safe. I screamed. I demanded to know what the hell his lunatic mother had done. Colin said, she thought it would be a cool way to welcome him into the family. She said the skin's probably just reacting badly. I told him, yeah, it's reacting to an unsanitary needle shoved into a 3-year-old's skin.
I truly couldn't believe my mother-in-law had taken her obsession with making the family look like some bizarre souvenir shop mural this far. She had crossed the line, and in doing so, she had permanently scarred my child. My son was asleep, but wincing in his sleep from the pain, and I felt like the worst mother alive. I gently woke him and rushed him to urgent care. They cleaned the area, checked for signs of infection, and got him the antibiotics he needed. Physically, he'll recover, but he's still walking around with a Yakuza-style tattoo on his tiny neck. My husband, Colin, was furious too. He stood firmly with me, shocked and enraged. But then he said something that made my jaw clench. He'd try to talk to his mother. Try? As if this was just a misunderstanding and not the outright mutilation of our toddler. I told him flat out that if he was going to talk to her, it better be to tell her to get a lawyer, because I was suing. That's when he said he didn't think our marriage could survive if I sued his mother. I looked him dead in the eye and said, "There's the door." He's been frantically trying to call his mother ever since. She's vanished, completely unreachable. No one's seen her, and her phone's off. My hands were shaking with rage as I rummaged through the kitchen drawer for our insurance cards. I accidentally knocked over a ceramic bowl she'd given us at my baby shower. It crashed to the floor. As I bent down to clean up the shards, something caught my eye. Lying among the broken porcelain was a small SD card. My heart dropped into my stomach. Why would she hide something like that inside a gift? Next stop was the pharmacy. My son needed his prescription filled ASAP. While I was at the counter, I noticed someone at the register beside us. It was Regina, my mother-in-law. She was pretending not to see us, pretending like everything was normal, even while the pharmacist awkwardly rang up both our orders. Her hand trembled as she signed her receipt, the same way it must have trembled while she scratched that hideous tattoo into my baby's skin. Something inside me snapped. I couldn't hold it back. I shouted, called her out right there in front of everyone. I told the whole pharmacy what she'd done, how she'd mutilated her own grandchild. People started filming. Phones came out. But Regina? She stayed calm. Too calm. She looked around and told anyone listening that she was just picking up her heart medication. She played the role of frail, confused grandmother like she was auditioning for an award. I looked like the lunatic. She looked like a victim. Right then, my phone buzzed. It was a text from Sabrina, Colin's sister. Her car had a flat tire, she needed help, and made it clear in the message that she wouldn't accept it from whoever was causing drama in the family, meaning me. Colin looked from me to his phone, caught between standing by his wife and playing the role of dutiful brother. Either way, he'd be choosing a side, and we both knew it. I watched Regina leave the pharmacy. She walked slowly, calmly, even rubbing her neck absent-mindedly, right where she'd scarred my son. I had a choice. Follow her, or stay with my feverish little boy who needed his mother. I stayed. He needed me more. That choice gave her time. Within 10 minutes, she had a Facebook post up, something about trying to honor family traditions while still respecting cultural differences. It was perfectly vague, perfectly manipulative, the kind of post that gets likes from wine aunties and sympathy from cousins who only half read the caption. In minutes, she had 47 reactions and a comment thread full of relatives praising her for being a loving grandma. My phone wouldn't stop buzzing. Family members were resharing her post with sad face emojis and vague jabs about people who overreact. Then everything started falling apart. Kai's fever spiked, and I had to take him to the ER immediately. At the same time, Colin's boss called, angry over missed deadlines caused by our family emergency. And then my parents called. They'd seen the Facebook post. They were driving up immediately, furious on our behalf. At the hospital, a nurse treating Kai's infection casually mentioned that she knew Regina from book club. She went on about what a doting grandma Regina was, completely buying into the narrative that had already formed. The ER bill was going to crush our already tight finances, especially after the unexpected trip out of state. But that couldn't matter right now. Then my phone buzzed again, this time the family WhatsApp group. Regina was live streaming from her kitchen. She claimed she was having a panic attack. Tears streamed down her face as she cried about just wanting to make Kai feel like one of the family. Her stream filled with comments from relatives who jumped in to console her as if she was the one who needed support. And there I sat, cold plastic chair, fluorescent hospital light, holding my sick, infected son in my lap, watching it all unfold like some sick reality show. Kai looked up at me, his cheeks flushed from the fever. He asked me, "Mommy, why did Grandma's special drawing hurt so much?" And then he said the one thing that made the air leave my lungs. "Grandma said Daddy wanted it too." Colin's face went white. Had he known? Had he said something? Had he been involved?
The SD card burned in my pocket. Whatever was on it might be important, but looking at it meant admitting I'd tampered with something that technically belonged to Regina. Legal consequences swirled through my head. I couldn't even open it without risking the chance I'd incriminate myself. Then my phone buzzed. Our neighbor had posted Ring doorbell footage of me at Regina's house. I'd only gone back to grab Kai's forgotten diaper bag, but the footage was edited and framed in a way that made me look like I was creeping around, stalking some poor elderly woman. The story was already turning against me, and fast. The next morning brought a new round of complications. The daycare called asking us to update our emergency contact list. Regina was still listed. Worse, she was the only one who knew about Kai's severe allergic reaction to a specific antibiotic, something that wasn't in the main system, just passed down verbally. Whether I wanted to or not, I had to communicate with her. That's when Colin's family went into full campaign mode. They dug up every example they could find of me overreacting, like the time I panicked after Kai took a harmless fall at the playground. Just like when you said the monkey bars were a death trap, became their new catchphrase. They were painting me as a hysterical, paranoid mother who imagined danger in every corner. My text threatening legal action against Regina was screenshotted and shared in the family group chat, twisted into evidence that I was bitter and vindictive, not a protective mother. Everything I did to try and advocate for my child was reframed to make me look unbalanced. Even my efforts to document the tattoo from different angles to build a case were labeled as obsessive. One of Colin's cousins suggested I might need a psych evaluation. Several others chimed in with agreement. The gaslighting wasn't random, it was coordinated. And that's when I realized just how far Regina's reach extended. She'd been taking the entire family to the same pediatrician for 2 decades. When I called the clinic to get a full set of Kai's medical records, the receptionist, sounding unsure, said they couldn't locate them. His vaccination card still at Regina's house from our last visit, giving her even more leverage over us. 3 days without proper rest wore me down. In my foggy exhaustion, I gave Kai the wrong dosage of antibiotics. One desperate call to poison control later, and now that moment was a permanent mark in our medical records, another bullet point in the growing list of reasons people believed I was unstable and unfit. The isolation deepened. Emma, my best friend since high school, began to pull away. Her husband had threatened to leave her if she got caught up in our family mess. She admitted she believed me, but said she had her own kids and couldn't risk her marriage to support me. I understood, but it still cut deep. The Facebook mom groups turned hostile. People crossed the street when they saw me coming. My face showed up in a community gossip thread painted as the heartless daughter-in-law who was trying to ruin a poor grandmother's life. But cracks started to appear in Regina's story. She told someone she'd taken Kai to a licensed tattoo artist, but nervously named the wrong strip mall. That slip proved she knew where it actually happened, but proving that would be a whole new war. Even my old college roommate ghosted me. She'd been trying to get a business license expedited and needed Regina's help at the county clerk's office. She sent a lukewarm apology but said she couldn't afford to take sides. It hit me like a wall. Regina hadn't just built a family, she'd built a network. Layers of loyalty, favors, influence, and quiet control that spanned decades, and I was suffocating under it. I thought I'd caught a break when I located security footage from the tattoo parlor. For a moment I felt hope, but someone saw me celebrating at a coffee shop nearby, and just like that it was spun into another example of how I supposedly cared more about winning than about my child. Every emotion I felt, every human reaction was twisted and weaponized against me. Then came the text that chilled me to my core. Regina wrote, "We both know how this ends. One of us loses everything. I've been part of this family for 30 years. You've been here for 5. It wasn't even subtle. It was a clear, unmistakable threat, a reminder of the power she'd spent a lifetime building and the one I was now threatening to dismantle. Twice a week, the grief counselor's office became my only safe place. I'd started seeing Dana after my postpartum anxiety began, and she already knew the full story about Regina. Every manipulation, every twisted word. During a recent session, Dana mentioned that her brother had just finalized a divorce and moved back into town. She described him with a warmth in her voice, but something about her words triggered alarm bells in my head. The way she talked about him sounded exactly like the kind of man Regina liked. My gut was right.
The following weekend at the farmer's market, I spotted Regina walking in arm with him, laughing like she didn't have a care in the world.
Dana's brother caught my eye and waved with way too much enthusiasm. Regina's smile widened as she watched me react. Another intrusion, another quiet conquest. She had found her way into one of the last safe corners of my life. That night, Colin and I sat on opposite ends of the couch, trying to piece together a conversation from 2 years ago. He swore I'd agreed to let his mother guide us in preserving family traditions. I clearly remembered drawing a hard line against anything permanent. Neither of us backed down, each convinced our version was the truth. The conversation ended with him storming off to the guest room. Alone, unable to sleep, I scrolled back through our old messages and found it. My stomach dropped. During a heated back and forth about circumcision, I had texted him, "Your mom probably knows best when it comes to family stuff." Just one sentence. But there it was, ammunition I'd handed her without knowing. The next morning, Kai's preschool teacher called. During circle time, he'd told the class, "Mommy says Grandma is dangerous, but Grandma gives the best hugs." The teacher logged it as a behavioral concern. Another scar added to the growing file on me, this unstable, overprotective mother narrative that was swallowing me whole. Then a memory resurfaced. 6 months ago, Regina had asked me about our baby monitor app, said she wanted to look into similar tech for her own house. I'd shown her how the cloud storage worked. Curious, I opened the app. At some point, she had upgraded our account to extended retention. The recordings stretched back for months. I scrubbed through footage late into the night. Then I found it. 2:03 a.m., Regina in the nursery, leaning over Kai's crib, whispering to him while he slept. "You'll be one of us," she said, over and over again. My hands trembled as I saved the clip. Finally, evidence, proof of her obsession, her intent. But nothing could prepare me for the family meeting. I walked into what felt like a courtroom where I was already found guilty. Regina sat in the middle, surrounded by sympathetic relatives, dabbing her eyes with a tissue. She called my evidence gathering harassment, my concern for Kai paralysis. I tried to show them the video, but they dismissed it without blinking. She was just checking on her grandson, they said. I was alone. I began checking Regina's social media compulsively. Then I remembered her Amazon account was still logged in on our tablet from a visit months ago. I checked the order history. What I found made me sick. 3 months ago, she had ordered a tattoo machine, specifically a Gene model, along with sheets of practice skin and something called infant numbing cream. The timing matched exactly when she started ramping up the family tradition rhetoric. Her tattooed friends had even posted vague Instagram captions referencing a welcoming for a new little one. It was all in code, but the meaning was obvious. This had been planned. I screenshotted everything. My phone filled with evidence, like digital scars from a war I never chose. One night at 3 a.m., Colin found me hunched over the tablet at the dining table, surrounded by printouts and sticky notes. He stared at the chaotic display and shook his head. "She said you were getting obsessive," he whispered. I saw the doubt settle in his eyes like sediment. He was beginning to believe her. Our marriage counselor suddenly became unavailable. After weeks of cancellations, we finally got a session. But something was off. Her tone, her questions, different. She kept pressing me about why I wanted to move away from Colin's family. Every answer I gave seemed to reinforce some unspoken theory. That's when I realized she'd been talking to Dana's brother, Regina's new boyfriend. At the community pool during pickup, I tried to record Regina. I kept my phone low, pretending to text while she casually brought up the tattoo. But she saw the reflection in the door. Her expression shifted. That cold, knowing smile returned. She changed the subject to the weather like nothing had happened. She was ready. She'd expected it. The next escalation came from Kai's swim instructor. He called me, confused and concerned. Regina had shown up claiming she had emergency custody papers. Thankfully, the instructor refused to release Kai without formal verification. But the message was clear. She was testing how far she could push, what she could get away with. I thought I'd finally found a breakthrough when the tattoo parlor employee agreed to meet me.
We sat at a coffee shop, and he seemed nervous, constantly glancing around. He started to tell me about the night Regina brought Kai in, but then his phone rang. He answered, listened, and his face went ghost white. When he hung up, he muttered something about an anonymous complaint to the health department. Someone had filed a report against the shop. He apologized, grabbed his bag, and walked out. He never finished the story.
I found out that Regina had been sleeping in Kai's room during her overnight visits. Colin confessed it sheepishly, saying she'd claimed it helped her feel closer to him. It got worse. Kai casually mentioned that Grandma had been wearing my old maternity clothes, the ones I thought I'd lost. She wasn't just overstepping, she was trying to replace me in my own home. Then came the offer, delivered through Colin. Regina would cover the entire cost of tattoo removal if I dropped everything and publicly chalked the situation up to a cultural misunderstanding. She claimed she'd found the best specialist in the state, someone who could minimize scarring. All I had to do was apologize for overreacting. Her generous compromise only made me look more irrational for refusing. It was masterfully manipulative. Digging further, I tracked down the daycare security footage. With some convincing, an employee helped me check the attendance logs. Sure enough, Kai had been checked in at the time Regina claimed the tattoo had been done. But then I found something else. A camera in Regina's neighborhood showed Colin's car parked at her house 2 hours earlier. He'd known and said nothing. That night, while he was in the shower, I went through his phone. Buried inside a notes app titled Grocery Lists was a hidden archive, months of dated entries documenting Regina's increasingly inappropriate behavior. He'd been tracking it, quietly, afraid to speak up. Trapped between protecting Kai and keeping the family peace, he chose silence. That silence gave her room to hurt our child. Then I hit another wall. The tattoo supplies. They could be explained away. Turns out, Regina had ordered them in preparation for her adult cousin's appointment. Suddenly, my hard evidence looked like coincidence. The cousin confirmed the story, and though the timeline was suspiciously convenient, it gave her enough plausible deniability to dismantle my narrative. My mother showed up after driving 10 hours without stopping. I expected support. Instead, she sat at the kitchen table, staring back and forth between us, and asked, "Are you willing to lose him the same way you've lost yourself in this war?" Her words were soft, but they hit with full force. She wouldn't pick sides, not if it meant losing access to her grandson. I was running out of allies. Desperate, I began using Regina's own tactics. I booked an appointment at her salon and struck up casual conversation with her hairdresser. That's when I learned about her recent health scare, something she hadn't disclosed to the family. She'd been feeling pressure to pass on traditions before it was too late. The insight felt useful, but tainted. A chance encounter at the grocery store put me face to face with her priest. I mentioned I was considering the church's community center for Kai's birthday party, and he offered to show me around. It gave me an excuse to be near the security system. While there, I ran into the janitor, who recognized me from when I'd helped during his medical emergency last year. He remembered seeing Regina's car parked there late in the evening on days she had told the family she had been home. He couldn't give me footage, but he offered to write a statement. It felt like a small victory in a war I could never win. Then something completely unexpected happened. Colin's ex, Alicia, filed for custody. She claimed she understood the family's traditions better than an outsider like me ever could. The petition was absurd, and my lawyer assured me it wouldn't go far, but it complicated everything. Now I was fighting 2 battles at once. In the middle of this chaos, I missed an appointment with the pediatric specialist, an appointment that had been on the calendar for months. The clinic marked it as a no-show and added a note about possible medical neglect to Kai's file. Somehow, Regina knew about the missed appointment almost instantly. She spun it into another example of my inability to prioritize Kai's health. Our credit card began declining. Legal bills were crushing. Then I learned that Colin, under Regina's influence, had rerouted funds from our joint account to a family-controlled account for Kai's medical needs. That account, I found out later, was being used by Regina to pay for therapy sessions that framed her as the stable caregiver stepping in during a crisis. The billing description even listed maternal trauma therapy. The final blow, at least for that week, came out of nowhere. Kai and I were sitting outside the ice cream shop, enjoying a quiet Sunday, when Regina appeared. She wasn't alone. Several of Colin's relatives flanked her like a private security team. I lost it. I screamed at her in front of everyone about the tattoo, about what she had done, about everything. She calmly ordered a vanilla cone. The teenage staff froze, wide-eyed. Phones came out. By that evening, they were clips of my meltdown circulating on local gossip pages. 2 days later, my remote work contract was terminated. The client cited excessive personal disruptions and repeated unavailability. They referenced phone logs showing missed deliverables and excessive personal calls. Regina hadn't just taken control of my child's body. She was unraveling my entire life.
I eventually found out who my replacement was. Regina's neighbor's daughter, Clara. Young, friendly, and freshly indoctrinated into the family's way of life. Regina's long-nurtured network had turned into a weapon, systematically dismantling everything I relied on to support myself and Kai. Living in an extended-stay motel felt like the lowest point I'd ever reached. Meanwhile, Regina had temporarily moved into our family home to help Colin during our separation. She cooked in my kitchen, slept in my bed, played with my son in the backyard I'd landscaped by hand. Every photo Colin sent showed her firmly in my place. Late one night, my father called. His voice cracked as he begged me to stop. "You're killing your mother," he said. "Watching you tear yourself apart, it's too much." The same man who raised me to fight for what's right was now pleading for surrender. I couldn't bear to answer. I hung up, tears stinging my eyes. Even those who'd quietly helped me began to suffer. The daycare worker who gave me access to attendance records was suspended. Her supervisor called me directly to explain that my request had violated privacy policies. The worker's daughter had asked, "Why did that mean lady make Mommy cry?" Now, I wasn't just the villain in Regina's version of the story, I was becoming the villain in others' lives too. News of the suspension spread fast. The daycare worker's husband filed for divorce, citing the unbearable stress their family had endured from getting dragged into our toxic drama. The collateral damage of my fight was growing. And still, I pressed on. Every scrap of evidence felt essential, worth it, even as it scorched everything around me. But then, my last loyal friend hesitated. She asked me quietly, what if the tattoo was meant with love, just expressed the wrong way? I had no answer that didn't sound petty or vengeful. The truth was slipping through the cracks, lost in the wreckage of my own obsession. In family court, I made a calculated choice. I admitted to my history with postpartum anxiety, laid everything bare. I needed to show I had nothing to hide, to establish my stability now. But I watched as Regina's lawyer scribbled furious notes. Every word I spoke was another weapon in her arsenal. I remembered the hidden notes app on my own phone, an archive I'd almost forgotten. In it were my own entries from months back. Kai saying Grandma hugged him too much, whispered in his ear when she thought no one was listening. I'd dismissed it as shyness, but the writing was on the wall long before the ink ever touched his skin. Regina's lawyer filed an emergency motion, moving our hearing up by 2 months. "The child needs stability," he claimed. My own attorney was out of town, his daughter's wedding, and couldn't prepare in time. Everything felt rigged. At one of the court-mandated supervised visits, I watched Regina with Kai. Her eyes filled with tears as she tried to explain her reasoning. "I just wanted him to belong," she said, her voice shaking. "It's part of who we are." She truly believed the tattoo had been a gift. Her recent heart diagnosis only added to her desperation to leave behind the legacy before time ran out. In those moments, she didn't seem evil, just misguided, overwhelmed. But love, I reminded myself, doesn't excuse harm. I began recording Kai's therapy sessions, against the rules, against my promises, documenting how the tattoo had affected him. He didn't like being touched around his neck anymore. He had nightmares. But I was weaponizing his pain now, too. I hated who I was becoming. Then, unexpectedly, a message came from Tessa, Regina's adult niece. She'd been following the family group chat silently, but something had shifted. She was disturbed by a conversation about marking the next baby. She forwarded me screenshots, code words, appointment dates, messages casually discussing what age would be ideal. Proof that Kai's tattoo wasn't an anomaly. It was a pattern. It should have felt like victory. And yet, when Kai ended up in the hospital with another infection, I stood beside Regina at his bedside, both of us holding his hands, both of us terrified. In that moment, we were just two women who loved the same little boy. But sympathy didn't stop the counter-narrative. Regina's lawyer leaned into a new angle: cultural insensitivity. I was isolating my child from his loving, supportive family over aesthetic discomfort. Their testimonies painted me as the outsider who never made an effort to understand. And they weren't wrong, not entirely. That was the worst part. Every lie had a grain of truth, twisted into a blade. Everything came down to Colin's testimony. Would he finally admit that he'd known what his mother was planning, that he'd parked outside her house before the tattoo, that he'd hidden notes about her escalating behavior for months? Or would he do what he'd always done, stand quietly between us, trying not to choose a side?
The man I had married was slipping away, piece by piece. Under the weight of it all, Colin had become someone else, someone who just wanted the noise to stop. My earlier grace haunted me now. Regina's other grandchildren began asking why they couldn't see Kai anymore. Their innocent confusion became ammunition, yet more evidence that I was tearing the family apart. One of the older cousins, just 8 years old, recorded a tearful message asking to see Kai again. Regina's lawyer submitted it to the court. The emotional weight of that child's voice weaponized against me. At the hospital where I worked, lines were drawn in silence. Some colleagues viewed me as a protective mother. Others saw a woman unraveling her family over a tattoo. Conversations stopped when I entered the break room. Years of carefully built professional relationships disintegrated under the strain of personal scandal. In a preliminary hearing, the judge said something that froze my blood. Aesthetic decisions, however objectionable, don't constitute abuse without demonstrable harm. The system I had trusted to protect my son didn't function on instinct. It functioned on provable facts. I was losing. Everywhere. Desperate, I reached out to Dr. Everett, Colin's childhood pediatrician. My father had mentored him early in his residency, and I was hoping that long-forgotten favor might still hold value. He agreed to provide a medical opinion on the risks, but refused to testify beyond his expertise. Even debts had their limits. When the updated medical records came in, they confirmed what I'd suspected. Kai had experienced a severe reaction to the adhesive used during the tattooing. Regina had known about his allergy to certain adhesives. It had been on every version of his medical alert list. But she'd gone ahead anyway, believing the brief pain was worth a lifetime of belonging. Her version of love had literally endangered his life. But intent? That was harder to prove. The allergist findings made it clear this wasn't just about unsanitary tools. The materials themselves could have killed him if we hadn't sought immediate care. Regina had the records, she had the knowledge, and she still moved forward. Then, the final piece of evidence landed in my lap. The tattoo parlor employee, still under health department scrutiny, quietly reached out. He sent a photo of a receipt. Regina had paid cash for infant-grade numbing cream, the kind used for neonatal medical procedures. She'd planned for Kai's pain, but inflicted it anyway. With everything in hand, I faced a choice. I could pursue criminal charges, a public trial, testimony, exposure. Or I could resolve it in family court, where I might not get revenge, but I could secure protection. I chose Kai.
Regina's pride finally betrayed her. During a court recess, she posted a message on Facebook. "No matter what happens in court, I gave my grandson his legacy." The screenshot entered evidence. It was damning, her own words admitting what she'd denied under oath. When I stood before the judge, I let the documents speak. I didn't shout. I didn't accuse. Every page focused on Kai, his medical needs, his long-term well-being. Across the courtroom, I watched Regina slowly realize she had lost. The house of influence she'd built over decades was collapsing under facts she couldn't spin. Witness after witness confirmed the pattern. Former friends of the family shared stories. The tattoo artist finally admitted that Regina had pushed back when he told her to wait. The cracks widened. The truth poured through. Final custody proceedings began. The tension was unbearable. Colin sat in the middle aisle like a physical symbol of his divided loyalty. His testimony would tip everything: our future, our family, our son's safety. The dragon tattoo on Kai's neck had become more than ink. It was a symbol of what happens when love is used to erase autonomy, when belonging is forced rather than chosen. The medical files laid across the courtroom table painted a damning portrait. The allergist confirmed that Kai's reaction hadn't just been severe, it had been potentially fatal. Regina had known. She had seen the records. She'd chosen to ignore them. The receipt for the numbing cream confirmed premeditation. But her heart condition, the one that had been paraded through every court motion, added a layer of complication. Sympathy lingered around her like perfume. In our motel room, Colin paced restlessly, practicing what he would say. I watched him try out different versions of the same narrative, each one peeling away more of what he'd kept hidden. Regina had shown him tattoo designs for months. She'd asked about dates. She'd spoken of timing. He'd known far more than he admitted.
Colin said he thought his mother was just fantasizing, indulging a bizarre dream, not actually preparing to tattoo a 3-year-old. He never imagined she'd do it. But when the tattoo artist, finally cornered by a looming health department shutdown, agreed to testify, the full picture started to form. He described Regina arriving with Kai asleep in her arms, demanding the work be done immediately. He'd refused at first, citing age restrictions, lack of consent, basic professional ethics. She offered triple his usual rate, all in cash. His testimony proved that this wasn't a moment of poor judgment. Regina had actively sought someone willing to break the rules. Tessa, Regina's niece, provided more damning evidence. In the family's WhatsApp group, she uncovered a disturbing pattern: coordinated discussions about welcoming the grandchildren with ink. They shared tips for keeping toddlers still, debated where to place the tattoos for best visibility, even exchanged links about which designs would age well. It wasn't just Regina, it was a culture, a conspiracy. During Kai's dermatological evaluation, a specialist found something even more alarming. The ink used in the tattoo contained metal compounds Kai was allergic to. The reaction had caused ongoing inflammation. Removal would require multiple laser treatments once the infection subsided, each risky, each painful. The damage extended far beyond what could be seen. When Colin finally took the stand, no one knew what to expect. Under oath, he admitted that he had seen tattoo supplies in Regina's craft room weeks before the incident, but he'd convinced himself they were for her adult clients. He hadn't wanted to believe his own mother capable of harming his grandson. His voice broke as he admitted choosing denial over protection. Then came the guardian ad litem interview. Using play therapy and soft questioning, the child advocate documented Kai's confusion and distress. He talked about how Grandma's special drawings hurt, how none of the other kids' drawings made them cry. His words were heartbreakingly simple, but they painted a clear picture of emotional trauma. And then I learned the worst of it. Regina had medicated him during the tattooing. The numbing cream she'd bought, already suspicious, contained lidocaine levels unsafe for young children.
Combined with Kai's known allergies, the dermatologist said it could have triggered cardiac issues. The expert testified that we were lucky. Our son had survived, with no lasting organ damage, but it could have gone very differently. Regina's breakdown on the witness stand revealed her true motivations. Between sobs, she described how her father had disowned her for getting tattoos, how she'd vowed never to let her children feel that same rejection. So she built a family tradition, one where ink meant love, acceptance, permanence. But her healing became our harm. Other grandchildren speaking through child advocates confirmed the broader pattern. They described decoration ceremonies where they were restrained by smiling adults, promised toys if they didn't cry, praised for being brave as needles pierced their skin. What Regina called legacy, the court now saw as coercion. Subpoenaed financial records from various tattoo shops painted a timeline of abuse. Regina had paid for 12 tattoos on children under the age of 5, some as far back as 20 years. When one artist refused, she found another. When one law was too strict, she crossed state lines. Each receipt was a record of bodily autonomy erased. During a court recess, Colin filed for separation. He told me he couldn't reconcile what he'd allowed to happen. He loved me. He loved Kai. But most of all, he couldn't live with himself unless he chose our son. The legal papers cited irreconcilable differences, but we both knew what it really meant. He had finally picked a side. The social worker's home study at Regina's residence turned up the final horror: a hidden basement studio, a full tattooing setup, design templates sized for small limbs, practice skins with children's names inked on them, sterile wraps, numbing agents, aftercare kits. She hadn't been planning one event. She'd been preparing for all of them. Expert testimony from a childhood trauma psychologist hit hard. He explained how forced body modification distorts a child's sense of self, how it teaches them that pain is a prerequisite for love, that identity isn't chosen, it's branded. Several jurors visibly shifted in their seats. Then Regina's sister took the stand. Her voice was quiet, hesitant. She recounted how their father would beat them if they altered their appearance, how Regina, once banished for a single tattoo, swore her own children would never feel that rejection. And instead, she created the inverse: forced inclusion. The cycle of generational trauma, spun in reverse, had kept spinning just the same. The prosecution's final blow came in the form of text messages. Regina had been grooming other family members to carry on the tradition. In detailed messages, she instructed cousins on how to calm children, apply numbing cream, and keep them still. It was systematic. It was strategic. It was abuse.
Regina had been sharing contact info for tattoo artists willing to bypass age restrictions, even offering to cover the cost of supplies. She wasn't just upholding a tradition, she was building a network to ensure it would outlive her. Kai's infection worsened. When antibiotics failed, surgical debridement became necessary. I held his little hand as they wheeled him into the operating room, whispering promises that the doctors would make the hurt stop. After surgery, the surgeon confirmed what I feared. The infection had nearly entered his bloodstream. One more day's delay, and it could have been fatal. In court, character witnesses testified on Regina's behalf. They painted her as a loving grandmother, devoted to family, desperate to hold on to a sense of unity. They described her generosity, her loyalty to her grandchildren, her fear of being forgotten. Some even admitted they'd known about the tattoos, but had seen them as quirky, harmless. Their testimony didn't exonerate her. It exposed how deep the community-wide enabling went. The judge called in a cultural anthropologist to evaluate Regina's claims that her actions were rooted in tradition. The expert's report was unequivocal. While many cultures do practice body modification, none endorse forcing it on unwilling children, especially in the face of known medical risk. Regina's justification wasn't cultural, it was fabricated. I met with the prosecutor to review potential charges: assault, child endangerment, unauthorized medical practice. The list was long. But pursuing a criminal case would mean media coverage, drawn-out trials, and the possibility of Kai being called to testify. Justice came with a cost, and I had to consider what my son needed most: peace. Meanwhile, Regina's health was deteriorating. Her heart condition worsened under the stress of the proceedings, landing her in the hospital. Despite everything, I found myself asking after her condition. She was still Kai's grandmother, still the woman who, in her fractured way, had loved him deeply. The tattoo removal consult brought fresh complications. The specialist explained that Kai's skin was too young for safe laser work. The risks were significant: scarring, pigment changes, and painful sessions requiring sedation. We'd have to wait until he was older. Until then, the dragon would remain, visible through formative years, a scar, a reminder, a part of his identity. Then, other families started coming forward. Parents who had resisted the tradition shared stories of being shunned, of their children being treated as outsiders. Some had gone no contact, cutting ties completely. The practice hadn't united the family, it had fractured it across generations. Colin's own therapy records submitted during the custody proceedings traced the internal conflict that had haunted him for years. He had been tattooed at age 4, told it was a mark of love, a badge of belonging. Only when he became a father did he begin to question what he'd been taught. The sessions showed his slow realization that real love doesn't require pain, doesn't demand permanence. The most powerful testimony came last, from the children themselves. Through sensitive, age-appropriate questioning, they described their memories. Some too young to recall much. Others still remembered the needles, the pressure to be brave, the promises of candy and toys if they didn't cry. They weren't marks of love. They were moments of coercion, dressed up as celebration. Regina's final statement to the court was disorganized, but deeply revealing. She spoke of wanting her grandchildren to never feel excluded the way she once had. She saw the tattoos as a shield, proof of belonging. Her love had twisted into something dangerous, something obsessive. After 3 days of deliberation, the verdict was delivered. Guilty of assault, child endangerment, and practicing medical procedures without a license. The judge made it clear: cultural belief does not override a child's right to bodily autonomy and medical safety. Sentencing would take into account Regina's age, health, and clean legal history, but I requested the chance to speak before that decision. When I addressed the court, I didn't describe a villain. I described a grandmother whose unresolved trauma had poisoned the way she expressed love. I asked for therapy, mandatory psychological treatment. I asked for supervised visitation after she completed treatment. And I asked for a binding legal order preventing any further body modifications for Kai until he turned 18. The sentence reflected the complexity of the case: 2 years probation, mandatory psychological counseling, parenting courses focused on bodily autonomy, supervised visitation only after 6 months of completed therapy. No jail time, but no more unchecked access to Kai or other grandchildren. Legal walls were finally in place. Afterward, Colin and I met with a mediator to determine custody. There was pain, distance, so much we couldn't undo. But we agreed on one thing: Kai's safety, his right to heal, would come first.
We agreed on joint legal custody, with primary physical custody granted to me. Colin formally acknowledged his failure to protect Kai and committed to ongoing therapy before seeking any unsupervised visitation. Our marriage was over, but our co-parenting had a chance to begin healing. The court's restraining order included a specific clause: no family member was permitted to attempt body modifications on any minor. It extended to all grandchildren, finally offering protection to those too young to speak for themselves. After the ruling, several family members quietly expressed relief. They'd wanted to say no, but hadn't known how without shattering their relationships. Kai began play therapy soon after. His therapist used dolls, drawings, and games to help him articulate the feelings he couldn't quite name. He talked about the hurt mark and his confusion over why Grandma had done it. Healing would take time, but he was still young. With the right support, resilience was possible. I enrolled in trauma-informed parenting classes. I needed to learn how to help Kai reclaim the autonomy that had been taken from him. We began practicing consent in everyday life, asking before hugs, honoring his no without question, giving him choices in clothing and hair. Every act reinforced a simple truth: his body belonged to him and no one else. The scarring from the infection required ongoing monitoring. Monthly dermatology visits tracked the healing process and watched for long-term complications. The dragon's outline remained beneath the scar tissue, subtle but permanent, a mark that would one day need explanation. Support arrived from unexpected places. Other parents who'd resisted the family's tradition began reaching out. We formed an informal network, sharing resources and stories, replacing the isolation with solidarity. In protecting our children, we had each lost something, but now we were building something new. Regina completed her mandated therapy. She wasn't allowed direct contact yet, but her therapist shared that she'd written letters of apology to us, letters filled with genuine reflection and remorse. Change, we were told, was slow, but it had begun. 8 months after the verdict, the first supervised visit took place. Regina sat in a stiff plastic chair in the social worker's office, her eyes filled with tears as Kai stood behind me, uncertain. She didn't force contact. She didn't reach out. She waited. And in that moment, choosing respect over desperation, I saw the smallest sign of progress. Recovery would come, not in sweeping redemption arcs, but in tiny, steady steps. My workplace transferred me to a new department, away from those who had taken sides. The shift offered a clean slate. Slowly, I began to rebuild the professional reputation that had been damaged by the personal disaster that bled into every corner of my life. The legal fees would take years to recover from, but stability was returning, one paycheck at a time. New traditions emerged. Family gatherings now revolved around activities that respected personal space. Cooking together, storytelling, collaborative crafts. No ink, no pressure, just presence. Some relatives embraced the change, others stayed away. The family was altered, but not destroyed. When Kai turned 4, he picked his first temporary tattoo, a shimmering butterfly that faded in the bath. He showed it off proudly, beaming, because he had chosen it. That moment, so small, felt revolutionary. Every act of agency helped heal what had been taken. The dragon tattoo became a part of his story. We called it his warrior mark, a reminder of what he'd survived. As he grows, the narrative will evolve, not a story of victimhood, but of strength, always rooted in truth, always centered on his perspective. Eventually, 5 family members sought their own therapy. The ripple effect of one court case exposed a generational harm. Slowly, truth replaced tradition. The cycle began to break. Colin found balance. He supported his mother's recovery while fiercely protecting Kai. He showed up to every therapy session, took notes, asked hard questions. It didn't undo the past, but it showed he was working to earn trust through actions, not words. Our relationship shifted, from exes to co-parents with a shared goal. The tattoo shop that had done the procedure lost its license permanently. Word spread through our community. Establishments that entertained body modifications for minors faced backlash, informal accountability. Kai's pain protected others. That knowledge mattered. I began volunteering with child advocacy groups. I shared our story, publicly, cautiously, but honestly. It was terrifying, but necessary. If even one family recognized the warning signs, if one child was spared, the exposure would be worth it. Eventually, Regina's letters arrived. They were handwritten, shaky, raw. She expressed sorrow for what she'd done, acknowledged the choice she had stolen. She finally saw how she had prioritized her pain over Kai's safety, and she regretted it.
Regina's words couldn't undo the harm, but they showed real growth. Forgiveness would come, in time. Trust, however, would take much longer to rebuild. Kai started kindergarten with the dragon still visible on his neck.
We had spent weeks preparing him for questions, practicing answers, framing the story in a way that gave him power, not shame. When classmates asked, he simply said, "It's my warrior mark. It means I was brave." Kids accepted that without hesitation. No teasing, no judgment. Not every relationship survived the aftermath. Some relatives viewed the verdict as betrayal and chose to keep their distance. Others, quietly and privately, thanked me for breaking the cycle they hadn't known how to stop. The family divide revealed deeper truths about the difference between enabling and protecting. Kai's medical team recommended waiting until he turned 10 before attempting laser removal. By then, his skin would be better equipped to handle the process. We marked it on the calendar, budgeted, planned, but we also discussed what might happen if he chose to keep it. His body, his choice. Therapy helped me realize how much I had changed too. I'd entered this war as a peacekeeping daughter-in-law, afraid to upset the balance. I emerged as something else entirely, a mother who fought relentlessly for her child's right to safety and choice. The ordeal had shattered so much, but it also revealed strength I didn't know I had. Kai will grow up knowing his mother didn't let silence win, that his story mattered, that he mattered. Our case began to ripple outward. Attorneys referenced the ruling when protecting children from forced body modifications masked as cultural tradition. The judge's decision became a guiding precedent, used in legal briefs and child protection proceedings across the state. Our pain built a path for others. Regina's final therapy report showed steady, meaningful progress. She had learned the difference between love and control. The court allowed supervised visits to continue. Rebuilding trust with Kai would take time, measured in small moments and gentle boundaries, but the door was no longer closed. Redemption, we learned, was possible through sustained work. 2 years later, life found a new rhythm. Kai attended therapy once a month. He talked about his experiences through play, processing in a way that made sense to a child his age. I maintained firm boundaries, but allowed Regina to visit, always supervised, always cautious. Colin co-parented consistently. He showed up, made space for growth, and earned back trust step by step. The dragon was still there, but it no longer defined us. We had survived by choosing healing over vengeance, protection over punishment. And in doing so, we'd broken the pattern that had haunted this family for generations. The scars, both visible and invisible, would always be there. But so would the lessons. My son would grow up understanding that his body belonged to him, and that love meant respect, not control. The dragon had marked the beginning of his pain, but it had also marked the beginning of our truth.